Opening remarks. Hello, dear viewers and listeners. Thank you for your interest in this channel. If the interest is not trivial, then you will find complex information about the fundamental laws of matter, about its epistemological, methodological aspects and properties of cognition of these laws by the subject created by it. A feature of the aspects of cognition will be the laws of the dialectical unity of the opposites of matter. Laws that matter has created for itself, which it obeys, and which its mind is aware of and fulfills. Reason as the highest form of self-regulation. Self-regulation is the main law of unity and self-preservation of eternal and infinite matter, the preservation of its higher mind. Within the framework of this law, any motion that does not correspond to its parameters is always finite in existence, but always in unity with it, with the possibility of restoring the eternal and the infinite. In other words, the law is a form of continuous movement, a form that is not perceptible in an instant. And the higher law is a form of eternal and infinite motion. Mind is the highest form of the content of eternal and infinite motion with the property of self-regulation for self-preservation in all changes, transferences, and packings of matter. This is the philosophical concept for the development of the energo-informational analysis of the movement of material systems. But, everything in order. Briefly about the author. The prepared information integrates the theoretical and practical experience of the author, who studied in his student years at the Technical University at the Faculty of Power Engineering of the city of Donetsk, Ukraine, philosophy, computer science, energy, control theory, and its technical means. The author used the knowledge gained for 45 years, working in the Ministry of Geology of Ukraine. The author solved scientific and technical problems, with the defense of solutions at the Institute for Modeling Problems in Energy named after G. E. Pukhov of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. Studying the geological environment, by technical means, he automated the means of destruction of the environment, technological methods, optimized the technology of environmental destruction, information methods, he simulated non-destructive testing of the environment, the author searched for minerals in it. The biggest find of the mineral was geothermal energy. This energy is based on gravitation, as the basis of all known energies, physical, chemical, biological, social, economic, thinking. Briefly, about the geological environment. The geological environment, as an object of cognition, is a heterogeneous, anisotropic medium with vertically distributed thermoelastic energy parameters. It was the physical properties of this medium that pointed to the unity of opposites, heating-cooling, compression-stretching, determinism probability, radiation absorption, discontinuous-continuous, in the inhomogeneous gravitational field of this medium. The study of the geological environment by Newton's laws somewhat changed these laws written by Newton for free physical space with concentrated energy parameters. In a particularly interesting way, the changes belong to the energy triad, consisting of the general, active, passive energies of the element of the environment. A single volume of a homogeneous isotropic physical space with concentrated energy parameters was considered an element of the medium. Such an element, having its own triad, has its own phase of energy invariant, which uniquely determines all the physical parameters of a given element. And depending on its change, namely, on the location of the element in different coordinates of the inhomogeneous gravitational field within the geological environment of the Earth, these changes of the triad revealed one logarithmic law of connections, coordinates, velocities, accelerations, forces, momentums, energies, densities of masses and charges, temperatures, pressures. Thus, in the study of the physical properties of the geological environment, the main philosophical idea of the unity of the properties of closed, geological, and open, free, space was formed. This unified representation became the idea of a single Gaussian physical space, consisting of physical points with arbitrary internal parameters and configurations, but with one parameter of existence, called the phase of the energy invariant. The study of changes in the energy triad formed the main philosophical and physical understanding of the laws of their coexistence, as an axiom for solving Hilbert's sixth problem. The axiom has the following physical formulation. The unity of the laws of matter, conservation, change, transfer, and packaging of energy is fulfilled by each point of Gaussian physical space. Research has established, these laws are also fulfilled in all dialectical forms of the motion of matter. Let us consider the main epistemological discoveries of Gaussian physical space, revealed in the process of studying the geological environment by the unity of these laws. Briefly about the discovery of the dialectical unity of the energy laws of matter in the geological environment. The first discovery, one of the most interesting, concerns the properties of the energy triad in the geological environment. In this environment, the triad, by its changes, revealed a change in the sign of the gravitational force within the gravitational field created by the coherent system of physical points, a volumetric gravitational standing wave located from the center to the surface of a system of physical points. The wave has ascending and descending energy crests from the center of mass, respectively. The crests have a decreasing energy density of physical space from the center to the surface of the coherent masses. Depending on the energy density, changes in the phases of the energy invariant of each element of the medium occur. These changes are concentric spherical layers over the region of the center of mass, in which the thermal energy density of physical space decreases towards the surface. This leads to the dialectical unity of the processes of condensation of some and to the dissociation of others of the physico-chemical structures of the elements of the geological environment in these layers. In the region of the center of mass, physical space is symmetrically stretched by external masses. The volume of this physical space depends on the magnitude of the external masses of the system of physical points. At a volume greater than the volume of a proton, protons and neutrons that fall into the volume of the center of mass are destroyed, generating high-energy gamma quanta with electromagnetic and gravitational properties. Gamma quanta are absorbed by external free protons and neutrons, nuclei, atoms, molecules, lithospheric crystals, and atmospheric gases. Free protons and neutrons, heating up and inflating to a critical size, are ready to destroy their quark shells in the center of the total mass. Above the space of free protons-neutrons, there is a concentric layer of nuclei, heavy at the bottom, iron, light at the top, hydrogen and helium, of elements formed after gamma quanta heated their atoms, which lost all their electron shells and decayed. Above the space of nuclei is the concentric space of atoms. Hard to dissociate atoms are located at the bottom, these are hydrogen and helium atoms. Easily dissociable atoms are located at the top of the concentric layer, these are atoms of heavy elements that have been attracted by the center of mass to the zone of physical space with a greater or lesser energy density. Above the space of atoms is the space of molecules. Above the concentric space of molecules there is a concentric space of crystals, liquids, gases. Above the crystalline layer of the system of physical points, for example, the Earth, the outer layer is condensed, this is the layer of atmospheric gases. Behind them is condensed physical space, with the property of a gravitational field, as a region of connection between a finite coherent system of physical points and an infinite system of energetically balanced physical points of matter. This property of the unity of compression extension, analysis synthesis of elements, is inherent in the entire universe. In other words, the processes of expansion and contraction of matter, as a homogeneous system of physical points, are local, distributed stochastic, symmetrical with respect to the centers of internal and external accumulations of masses, equally subject to inter-energy laws, and do not depend on the scale, that is, on the number of physical points. Briefly about the second discovery of the dialectical unity of the energy laws of matter in the geological environment. This discovery concerns the oneness, the infinitely small, the finite, the infinitely large in the geological environment. This discovery is also one of the most interesting properties of the energy triad, in which zero is infinitesimal. Zero as a property of energy equilibrium that requires the infinite energy of the universe to decrease. This property is best conveyed by the language of mathematics. Zero is identical with the infinity between which one is located, as a finite one. Finite, which contains complete information about a finite system of physical points as a local phenomenon of matter with an infinitely small and infinitely large property. This is the dialectical unity of the existence of contradictions, infinitely small, finite, infinitely large. In other words, no matter how the finite is distributed by its quantity in physical space, it is always clamped, subordinated, and retains the general properties of matter. In the infinitesimal, it is the property of zero, as a property of the energy equilibrium of the entire infinite physical space, that is, the state of unperturbed matter, as its rest, its equilibrium, its stationarity, its infinite passive energy. Finite is a property of the finite value of the energy triad as a local perturbation of infinitesimal matter. In the infinitely large, it is all the active energy of matter perturbed by the infinity. This idea of a single connection between the micro-, meso- and macro scales of matter made it possible to develop a physico-mathematical model of its deterministic probabilistic energy state, as a Gaussian physical medium, in the form of a function of deterministic probability. Abbreviated, FDV. The deterministic probability function models the unity in the existence of the following contradictory properties and attributes of all metaphysical and dialectical forms of matter motions. Determinism and probability. Discrete and continuous. Rest and movement. Form and content. Material and ideal. Quantity and quality. Necessity and sufficiency. Stationarity and variability. Briefly about the third discovery of the dialectical unity of the energy laws of matter as a continuation of the geological environment. This discovery concerns the unity of the geological environment with dialectical forms of the motion of matter, physical, chemical, biological, social, economic, and thinking. This discovery is also one of the most interesting properties of the energy triad. The property of the energy triad is endowed with all dialectical forms of the movement of matter, physical, chemical, biological, social, economic, and thinking. In each of these forms of motion there are general, active, passive energies, which are shown how to calculate. The main relevant parameters for the calculation of these energies have been determined. Each dialectical form of the motion of matter has its own space, its own objects, its own energies, general, active, passive. The dialectical property of energy is a jump. Energy is the measure of motion and rest of the corresponding objects in the corresponding space created by them. It is the content of the spatio-temporal form of its existence. These are all the properties of the final object. Such is the initial dialectical physical idea of the unity of everything. And this unity is energy. And the main methodology for obtaining new epistemological results of cognition in all manifestations of matter, the author proposes the concept of energy-informational analysis of the movement of material systems. At the moment, the author has managed to explore and show the energy-informational unity between physical, chemical, socio-economic, and thinking systems. I leave biological systems to descendants who will be interested in scientific substantiation and conscious creation of biological objects with specified properties. Access to this will be opened by the study of the energy properties of genes by the method of energy-informational analysis. For example, the lectures will show how to transform a molecule with a symmetrical smooth energy surface into a SARS-2 molecule or another molecule that is energetically unbalanced with the external biological environment, by changing only the total energy of this molecule. Energy-informational analysis has shown the basis for the development of the following aspects of cognition. Aspect No. 1. This is the formation, existence, and change of structures of local systems of physical points depending on the energy triad of initial and final objects or on the values of the phases of energy invariance. For example, for the task of constructing a dialectical table of metamorphism of systems of physical points, substance field, field substance, that is, to establish quantitative-qualitative metamorphism between objects, photon, particle, nucleus, atom, inorganic molecule, organic molecule. Aspect No. 2. This is the appearance of absorption properties or the emission of energy by a system of physical points depending on the even or odd number of unit masses in them. Aspect No. 3. This is the appearance of the property spin, its discreteness, its connection with the internal physical parameters of the motion of the general system of physical points. Aspect No. 4. This is the emergence of the property of unambiguous identification of basic parameters, physics, geometry, algebra, information. Aspect No. 5. This is the unity and generalization of the properties of mass and charge in a system of physical points, defining them through the forms of motion of matter space-time. The same properties are possessed by objects of physical space located in different places of infinite matter. The even property of the system of physical points that created the space they control generates objects, galaxies with perturbed, light, matter. An odd property of a system of physical points that control a certain amount of physical space is generated by objects, galaxies, with both perturbed, light, matter and unperturbed, dark, matter. But all these objects are connected by a common physical space, by the general laws of dialectical motion, by all the inter-energy laws, conservation, change, transfer, and packaging of the energy triad. About this in specific lectures. A few words about the history of the knowledge of matter. Nature did not give us all the knowledge at once, but gave us conditions, that is, external simple interaction with the world around us. On the basis of this simple interaction, we must come to self-awareness through the consciousness of all matter. Self-consciousness is the highest form of the existence of matter, and its content is the structure of our consciousness. Consciousness is formed on the processes of interaction of the subject with the outside world, observation, mutual action from the concrete to the abstract and from the abstract to the concrete, learning. In these processes, the subject uses, creates and improves new ordered selected energy properties of matter. The difference between self-consciousness and consciousness lies in the cognitive property that is spontaneously present in the processes of consciousness formation and deterministically determines self-consciousness, because the latter, choosing the future existence of matter, bears full responsibility for the success of the idea's realization. So, it is the success of the implementation of the idea that depends on determinism, namely, on the use of the objective laws of nature, which do not depend on the subject, that is, on you and me. The truth of the connection between determinism, order, and stochasticism, chaos, is the truth of the connection between the infinite and the finite, being and non-being, the discrete and the continuous. Considering them separately, we immediately lose half of the world. And moving further in a limited view, we accumulate problematic epistemological tasks, we come to hopeless methodological dead ends. All this must be solved, seen, taken into account, avoided, at the beginning of the path of cognition. What are these methodological dead ends and epistemological unsolvable problems of our consciousness today? Let's divide our consciousness into three main knowledge, on the micro, meso and macro scales of matter. It should be noted that each of them uses its own methodologies and its own knowledge of objective truths. Thus, on a macro scale, observation is the only method of cognition of the physical space around us. What knowledge did this method give? Knowledge of the laws of gravitation, and many phenomenological theories of these laws in mathematical interpretations. And since physical categories in such interpretations turned out to be undisclosed, either because of the lack of empirical observations, or because they were not needed in mathematical formalism, geometric formalism became the basis of scientific thinking about the properties of the forms of existence of the motion of objects without taking into account physical space. The boom in string theories for everything has not improved the situation with physical space. Consider the meso scale. On the meso scale, the methodology from the concrete to the abstract and from the abstract to the concrete is used to the greatest extent for the study of physical, chemical, biological, social, economic systems, and systems of thought itself. Almost all the knowledge necessary and sufficient for the existence of biological and socio-economic systems has been obtained here. But what knowledge has not yet been obtained about the laws of motion of dialectical forms of motion of matter? This is knowledge about the laws of the unity of forms and content in matter. The reason for this is metaphysical thinking. The main property of this thinking is the unchanging given. Logic and computer science began to develop on its basis. 1 and 0 became the non-alternative metaphysical categories for being and non-being, respectively. But for a better understanding of infinite being, quantum computing was needed. The logic of accidental knowledge does not lead to new logic. And then, there is a dead end. A boom in the development of artificial intelligence has begun. From a bit of information came to a qubit. What's next? How does nature magnify itself by 9 times? So, in 2009, a Malayan woman gave birth to 9 twins. And how to introduce the cognitive properties of matter into artificial intelligence, if experience and theory for obtaining new knowledge, new truths, have not been mastered by science. And what, in general, is the physics of quantum computing? Looking ahead, I will say that atomic properties are definitely not enough for such calculations, because the atom itself is a ready-made physical computed object of matter. In the meantime, think about the question, how to simultaneously add, subtract, multiply, divide the 3 letters denoting the fundamental physical categories. This is the unity of opposites in the operators of consciousness for cognition of all forms of existence of the motions of matter. You will find the answer in a specific lecture. What do we have on the micro scale? On the micro scale, the hammer became the only method of cognition of matter. It would be okay to beat the categories of mass or charge to reveal their essence, otherwise they beat on the names, in quotation marks. As a result, more and more new pieces of matter with new names are obtained. A hammer is the first tool of geologists. There were physico-chemical geologists who pounded the geological environment from the surface to great depths. We found 94 natural corpuscular elements for the periodic table. Now physical geologists have been added to them. Studying the structure of corpuscular elements, they hammered more than 350 particle wave elements. They have created a table of these elements, combine them with the Standard Model, and dream of increasing the energy of the hammer, accelerator. But what kind of environment are they beating? The internal physical space of the particles is declared to be this medium, and Lagrangian and Hamiltonian, with 185 terms in their equations, have compiled the Standard Model for modeling the metamorphism of these particles. Further, considering the physical space of these particles with the stochastic, rapidly occurring mixing of different qualities of motions in this physical space of physical points, Schrödinger's metaphysics, the physical concepts of the discrete continuous property of being, Lagrange, Hamilton, Newton, and Poynting, replaced the wave function with the information emptiness, in quotation marks. Time, along with the previously lost physical space in macrophysics, has been lost in microphysics. The doors for the cognition of real physical space have closed, both from above and from below. What to do? Matter began to be understood in the properties of elements only from the periodic table, and in microphysics, only through energy. What to do with the concept of energy? Max Planck saved the situation with the impasse in the cognition of physical space by pointing to the action of this physical space, to its inseparable connection with scale and time, to its constant physical parameters that unite macro-meso- and microphysics. From these parameters, matter performs all its physical calculations with the formation of new different dialectical structures with corresponding forms of their existence. Form without content does not appear and does not exist by itself, and content cannot exist without the corresponding form determined by it. But what are the laws of physical computation, and how do they differ from mathematical ones? The author asks this question to everyone on this channel, and answers himself. It is necessary to make the transition from metaphysical thinking to dialectical thinking, by defining a single dimensionless element, general abstraction, general category, for the property of matter, which will have an unambiguous identification of mathematical quantity and physical quality. And here, there is a need to formulate the idea of the unity of the quantitative and qualitative in matter, as its main cognizable attributes. The unity and immensity of quantity and quality does not at all mean that it is necessary to move on to the knowledge of matter, to pure mathematics. Such a transition should reflect the objective law of quantitative and qualitative changes in the process of the formation of dialectical structures. But then, what is this unit? What is this category? What signifies and calculates? What is the objective logic of its existence in matter, and what is its epistemological form in subjective logic, which contains all the information about physical space and governs the creation of new structures in objective physical space? And so, what are we going to do? To destroy or synthesize matter? To increase the energy of destruction and formalize an unknown space, or to announce a brainstorming of generalization of the accumulated tables of elements with corpuscular and wave properties with weakened and confused formation for 100 years? Financial geniuses know, in quotation marks. They declared, the end of old knowledge is the beginning of artificial intelligence. But, let's take a look at the 100-year history of success of their strategies. Their first cry was, full course for expensive electrics, Nikola Tesla to retire. Second, full course for money printing without a physical equivalent, because after the development of the electric boom with the efficiency of 35% conversion of primary thermal energy into electrical and mechanical work, inflation began to morally and physically destabilize the natural economy. Heat electric technology, the more money needs to be printed by the population to pay for primary energy, the consumption of which is growing exponentially. The low social responsibility of the strategy so heated and polluted the atmosphere, emitted by the remaining 65% of thermal man-made energy from the world economy, and flooded the banks with empty money, that the ecophysical deadlock of warming began to cost the survival of civilization from these strategies, and in the economy, offshores with dead money amounted to 40% of world GDP. The third one, a full course towards artificial intelligence, with the hope that it is he who will receive a lot of new knowledge from the old knowledge. But on what scientific basis will technical means be created, as new matter, and what IQ properties, good or evil, of intelligence will this matter have? Evil, as an IQ property of destruction, the higher mind for its eternal and infinite existence, will not miss in time. All three courses are the result of subjective management of socio-economic processes. In short, if money in socio-economic systems is in the hands of material points with IQ properties of political self-consciousness, bandits, thieves, cunning, fools, it means that all socio-economic processes will be controlled only for the temporary existence of these properties of material points, trampling on the laws of self-preservation of the higher mind by means of self-regulation of matter on the basis of GDP in socio-economic systems. This is the political mind of the power of civilization, which not only cannot go into the future, but also plunges the present into non-existence. But, matter cannot destroy itself. Let's summarize the results. What does modern consciousness have for the development of self-awareness? First, macrophysics, without knowledge of physical space, cannot move forward on its own, towards new truths. Second, mesophysics, without objective socio-economic laws, without the laws of the unity of dialectical forms of motion of matter, without the physical equivalent of money, cannot effectively organize the higher IQ properties in the 8 billion population to obtain new knowledge. Third, microphysics, without knowledge of time in physical space, without rejection of the random action of operators of physical quantities, cannot establish the truths of the deterministic and continuous origin, existence, interaction, and change of the closed physical space of particles with particle wave properties. This is the information basis for the new artificial intelligence based on the qubit. You can imagine the future yourself. All hope is for information about physical space. But where is it, and where to look for it? Complete information, about the unity of the objective and the subjective, about the proof of solutions to all the methodological and epistemological problems of modern consciousness mentioned above, solutions to ecophysical and econophysical problems of socio-economic systems are given in specific courses of lectures aimed at the synthesis of new intelligent matter. The first course is devoted to the deterministic probability functions of the energy triad, as the basis of quantum calculations based on the fundamental laws of physics, Gaussian geometry, and integer algebra. The second course is devoted to general energy, which provides cooling and purification of the atmosphere with the efficiency of 100% conversion of the heat of this energy into electricity and hydrogen. The third course is devoted to the simple and expanded reproduction of the energy of socio-economic systems and systems of thinking. I will say a few words about the information that destroys consciousness. What kind of information is this that limits itself in development? What is it characterized by? And what properties does it have? First of all, it is the information of empirio-criticism. Its main feature is a name, a fact, a limited idea, definition, and a lot of expensive experience. Secondly, it is the indefinability of logical connections between ideas and facts. Thirdly, it is the lack of evidence of a large number of it, one-sidedness, negativity, ineffectuality, incoherence, instantaneousness. Fourthly, this is subjectivism, with a single proof: freedom of thought, freedom of speech, is a natural right to opinion. With quality, it is used once in the media space. We encounter such information every day in both scientific and political, but not in religious thinking. Religious thinking does not change faith. Political thinking constantly changes its desires and interests, and let it live like this, but if only it subordinated others to it without its will. Scientific thinking, in order not to think, rejected determinism, proclaimed chance to be genius, and the beginning without end, the main truth of being, and made number the main hammer of knowledge. So, if you, dear viewers and listeners, do not intend to connect your further history of existence with the information of this channel, do not waste your precious time and find a more interesting channel, or, figuratively speaking, another hat for your head. But if you have firmly decided to satisfy your IQ interest with new knowledge of this channel, then the only thing that the author will appreciate in your decision is links to new information from this channel. Constructive criticism at the appropriate level is also valuable. In short, let us try to be useful to each other. So, slide no 2. This slide says that modern scientific thinking, as the highest form of motion of matter, does not coincide with the content of its motion. And content, as is known, determines the form of its existence. Thus, matter is dialectical, and thinking is metaphysical. Dialectical movement is eternal, and metaphysical thinking is fragmentary, limited by subjective ideas, static, monochromatic, costly, conflicting, insufficiently abstract, pragmatic. The self-consciousness of modern civilization consists of 0.001% of the population with scientific thinking, of 0.001% of the population with a leading political mindset, and the remaining 40% of the population with higher education, and plus the remaining 59% of literate people can be attributed to political and religious thinking. This suggests that the existing information about the laws of dialectical forms of motion of matter has a problem. Subjective logic is not adequate to objective logic will be relevant for a long time. The informational aspects of the inadequacy of consciousness on the micro-meso- macro scales of cognition of matter were highlighted in the introductory speech. We will be interested only in scientific thinking, because science is the highest quality of the adequacy of reason, has the language of truths. Politics is the adolescent period of the mind, which has the language of desires. Religion is the birth of reason, has the language of faith. Faith is not only a property of the subject's IQ, it is the information space of the existence of mind, as the highest form of the existence of matter. To be the mind as it be, to be matter or not to be, and what to be of the new matter, is decided by the higher mind, as self-consciousness formed on the basis of objective truths. The higher mind, as the highest form of self-consciousness of matter, chooses its primary desire as the highest law, as the form of its being. Self-consciousness chooses the form of being, independently. And these forms are, religion, politics, science. Religious and political thinking exists only in the socio-economic form of the movement of matter. Scientific thinking is objective if it repeats the movements of matter, observes its laws, and strives for self-preservation as the highest form of self-regulation of matter. The choice of the form of being, as the first invisible desire, is the law, it is the truth. Truth is subjective if it is determined by the self-consciousness of the subject limited in the informational space-time. In the information space of those knowledge or those properties of objects of matter that belong only to his being. Self-consciousness, like all the properties of a given subject, acts on the surrounding physical space, creates similar properties in a limited volume of matter, and has only the energy of the subject. Truth is objective if it is not limited in space-time. In the information space, it contains knowledge about the properties of all objects of matter. Self-consciousness, like all properties of all objects, acts on the entire physical space, creates similar properties in an unlimited volume of matter, and has the energy of all objects in physical space. This is the absolute resonance of the subject and the object in the energetic and informational being. This channel will deal with truths. The criterion of truth is matter fulfills the will of its laws, because if you violate at least one of the subjective or objective truths, nothing will happen, there will be no repeated being, there will be no new being. Therefore, the present is the negation of negative truths in the past, and the future is the negation of negative truths in the present. Only the truths that are not denied, not violated, by time are independent of time. An example of the eternal is motion at the speed of light in physical space. But since all truths exist in space-time, the space that belongs to these truths must be unchanging. In other words, the main property of objective truths is immutability and independence from time, immutability and independence from physical space. But, dependence on energy as the content of matter, space-time, as forms of its existence, is a property of everything finite. This is the law of being for all that is finite. Eternal being exists only for the zero and infinity of Gaussian physical space, and deterministic probabilistic being exists only for the finite. The transformation of the finite into the infinite, the increase of energy in the finite, from the energy of the atom, as a simple system of physical points, to the thinking energy of the biosystem, as a complex movement of a system of physical points, will be dealt with by the theory, energy-informational analysis of the movement of material systems. The first law of the eternal existence of matter is the law of its self-preservation. In all metaphysical and dialectical changes of motion, matter itself is preserved at every past, present, and future point of its physical space. Metaphysical thinking differs from dialectical thinking in the separation and differentiation of the forms of motion of matter. Metaphysical thinking represents the motions of objects in open, empty, space with common time. Dialectical thinking represents the motions of matter in open and closed physical space with a common local time and local energy in unity. All movements of points in physical space are local, subject to the laws, preservation, transfer, change, and packaging them in a closed space. These laws, as the basis of the eternal existence of matter, are easily fulfilled by it, creating complex local systems of physical points from simple ones. And how is the unity of these laws reflected in modern science? You can answer for yourself, since there is only one answer, there is no way, and the counter question, why, forever discourages the development of scientific thinking with the categories of dialectics, quantity, quality, form, content, negation of the negation, unity of opposites, part, whole, motion, rest, determinism, chance, eternal, temporal, finite, infinite, material, ideal, general and particular, and other categories of fundamental attributes of matter. All these IQ weights give rise to the question is, why? As for the task, to find the result of addition, subtraction, division, multiplication of 3 letters, then, it will make a good person smile, and a modern reviewer of a scientific journal categorically does not recommend showing such a task, and even easier ones, as experience shows. These phenomena led to the creation of this channel. For knowledge is not superfluous. but it is this task that is set by the author for modeling the unity of subjective logic with objective by the method of action of these simple operators, as a closed system of operators of dialectical cognition, for the analysis of data from the methodologies of observation, measurement, and forecast of quantitative and qualitative attributes of the motion of matter. The solution to the problem, to bring subjective logic closer to the objective logic of the subject of cognition, is offered by the author of this channel along with the methodology. The methodology for solving the problem includes the following techniques. To use from mathematics only a closed system of simple operators as qualitative attributes of the action of matter, and numbers as its quantitative attributes. To use general categories and concepts of energy in the form of letters from physics, and to connect them to use the general laws of conservation, change, transfer, and packaging of energy. Motion of matter. It is proposed to use dimensionless relative elements of the objective logic of the entropy of being and non-being in physics, chemistry, biology, sociology, economics, and the thinking of matter from computer science. Thinking of matter, as its highest form of motion, calculation of being, to consider it as the content of motion, consisting of the general, active, passive energy of material points. The decision affects scientific knowledge, philosophers, mathematicians, physicists, chemists, biologists, sociologists, economists, artificial intelligence. Let us consider a philosophical solution to the problem of the unity of the objective and the subjective in the thinking of matter on the example of the work of living and artificial intelligence. Let's set a task. What is the form and content of the motion of matter? Artificial intelligence, he answered. The form and content of the motion of matter are philosophical categories that help to describe and analyze the process of change and development of material objects. Content is the inner essence of the movement, its nature and main characteristics. It includes material carrier, that which moves. Causes and laws of motion, why and how change occurs. Type of movement, mechanical, physical, chemical, biological, social. Form is a way of existence and manifestation of content. It is the external structure of movement, its concrete expression. It can be said that the form of motion is how exactly change occurs, and the content is what exactly changes and by virtue of what laws. Example of combustion. Content, chemical oxidation reaction. Shape, release of heat, light, change in color, structure of matter. Thus, the content is primary, and the form is the way of its manifestation. This is the answer of artificial intelligence to the question posed. For the theoretical answer, we will give a score of 4. As for the answers in the example, here the artificial intelligence showed a complete lack of understanding of what it said. Why? The answer lies in the physical understanding of words. The fact is that living intelligence works at the frequency of space, that is, at the frequency of physical space, and artificial intelligence works at a machine frequency. In general, the science of understanding is the science of the cognitive property of matter. Correct general understanding of the structure of matter. The content of motion is energy, the laws of its action, which determine the form of its existence in physical space-time. The form of motion is a physical space-time determined by energy and the laws of its action for its existence. We will give a conceptual understanding of the content and form in combustion. Content is a process with the thermal law of change in the energy of a material system in physico-chemical space-time. Form is a physico-chemical space-time determined by the oxidation process in a material system. At this point, It should be noted that modern science proposes to model specific dialectical forms of the motion of matter, for example, physico-chemical space-time, and others, using the general attributes of matter, space, and time. What is the conclusion from our example? We are dealing with a general formula of misunderstanding of physical space by modern scientific consciousness, which gives the following problematic idea. Macrophysics is a form without content, only space-time. Microphysics is content without form, only energy with an empty wave function. In between is mesophysics, which is more related to microphysics. The task of linking the knowledge of mesophysics with the knowledge of micro and macrophysics requires appropriate categories, concepts, objects, and the logic of the laws of their connection, both objective and subjective. Such logic is the energy-informational analysis of the motion of material systems, since the unity of the form and content of the motions of matter is always considered as energy, space, time. The following slide tells about this concept. Slide 3. This slide shows the idea and space for finding a solution to the problem, development of the concept of energy-informational analysis of the movement of material systems. The concept is revealed by the following presentation. All forms and contents of the motions of matter at each of its points are subject to a single action of the laws, conservation, change, transfer, and packing of the triad of energies, general, active, passive, which determine the physical spatio-temporal metric. The subject of the concept's research is matter. But what is the gene of matter? In the energo-informational analysis, such a genome of matter is a physical point. From this gene it will be necessary to construct an algorithm of birth, existence, and disappearance of all finite things, of the infinite sum of which is being of the infinite. This means that in the finite there must exist attributes of the infinite, and in the infinite there must exist attributes of the finite. The infinite as physical space, which has two main manifestations, motion and rest. But what? And these are the finite images. Physical point. Physical line. Physical surface. Physical volume, as part of a closed physical space, which must be determined, contain parameters, motion and rest. The gene of matter must be combined with similar genes to create metaphysical and dialectical images. All images must be stable for a certain time in order to create new more complex images, physical, chemical, biological, social, economic, thinking, informational. And here, it is necessary to determine the primary most abstract general basic physical parameters of the gene for living and inanimate matter, its connection with other genes for the creation of new images and their qualities of movement and rest. The tool for the study of matter will be the Cartesian coordinate system. The method of investigation of matter will be the action of the laws, conservation, change, transfer and packing of the triad of energies, general, active, passive, connected by the operators, addition, multiplication, subtraction, division. Classical three-dimensional space has 6 orthogonal directions. Around each direction there is its own energy triad, which determines its static or dynamic energy state. This energy state is determined by 4 energy-informational parameters connected by a common direction of movement, 2 static and 2 dynamic. In total, the Cartesian coordinate system contains 24 physical parameters for building an energy-informational image of the movement of a material system. It can be a single physical point or a system of physical points. The concept can be called Hilbert's solution to the problem No. 6. The concept unambiguously identifies the parameters of mathematical spaces, geometry and algebra, physical spaces of energy spacetime, information spaces, to be or not to be, or chaos and order. Such a physical space was named by the author, ECT Gaussian space, in 2000. The concept contains all the solutions to the task. In turn, philosophy contains facts, postulates of the connection of matter genes with motion and the parameters of its complete measurement. Postulates of the physical content of operators, addition, subtraction, division, multiplication. Forms and content of movement. All the laws of motion. All qualities of movement. All the parameters of motion, their measurements, their becoming, their contradictory laws of birth, existence, and exclusion, the connection of these parameters with each other, the structuring and complication of open and closed physical and mathematical spaces, have a single metric, dimensionless energy, as the ratio of the energy of a part to the energy of the whole matter. The story of the birth of the concept began with the ideas of Nikola Tesla, who declared, "all energy." And one cannot but agree with these words. These words became clearer and clearer in the process of solving scientific problems in the technologies of prospecting and production of hydrocarbons in the geological environment. Especially in the technologies of geometric and parametric interpretation of 3D seismic data on direct reflected elastic waves. The physical parameters of the object that reflected these waves and lay deep in the geological environment were determined by the energy parameters of these waves. Existing methods of parametric interpretation of 3D seismic data, using frequency filter attributes to indicate the physical parameters of the object in automated interpretation systems, solved interpretation problems with probabilities from 25% to 50% for small and large oil and gas fields in unknown territories, respectively. The method of energy-informational analysis developed on the basis of this concept gave a 100% probability of solving the problems of parametric interpretation of wave fields with the correct solution of inverse problems to determine the physical parameters of the geological environment and the fluids saturating it according to the energy parameters of wave fields. The wave field of reflected direct waves was recorded on the Earth's surface by seismic receivers, as a seismic scanner. At each point of the recorded reflected straight wave in time, the physical and petrophysical parameters of the geological object at depth were determined. The understood generality of the mathematical method for extracting physical information on the kinematic and energy parameters of the elastic oscillations of the seismic receiver, as a physical point, ECT space was transferred to photon. To its closed physical space with electromagnetic properties. This result gave an informational impulse to the expansion of the concept of energy-informational analysis of the motion of other physical objects that have a cyclic nature of motion with general, passive, and active energy. Thus, the concept entered quantum physics, replacing the non-parametric Schrödinger equation of the wave function with the equation of the parametric wave function with physical parameters, time, position, velocity, acceleration, frequency, force, momentum, energy, action of a physical point with their exact definition, excluding Heisenberg's uncertainty with the energy-informational certainty of the internal space of the wave. The cyclical nature of the energy triad was transferred to matter, namely, to the mutual metamorphism of matter and field, labor and commodity, chaos and order, static and dynamic properties of thinking. The content of the development of the concept is shown on slide No. 4. Slide number 4. This slide presents the structure of the sequential development of the physical and mathematical concept of the method of energy-informational analysis of the motion of material systems, IEA for short. The basic subject of cognition of the motion of matter is the oscillatory motion of a physical point in the parameters energy spacetime. After a positive success in the parametric analysis of fluctuations of a physical point in a geological environment, the concept was developed in the modeling of a physical line and the entire physical space, called ECT Gaussian space. This space replaced such definitive concepts as empty space, vacuum, ether, field, dark matter, dark energy, and other space-time formal scientific concepts. The energy-informational parameter is a phase of the energy invariant that determines the internal energy and spatio-temporal structure of a living and inanimate physical point. Thus, the task of determining the unambiguous identification of physics, algebra, geometry, and information in the physical ECT Gaussian space was noticed and posed. The problem is solved by the energy-informational method. First, the replacement of the physical operators of quantum mechanics, a closed system of non-metric simple mathematical operators, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Second, the introduction of a single action of these operators on the dimensionless energy triad of the motion of matter. Third, by taking into account the eternal and infinite matter at a physical point, by the unified action of the laws of motion, conservation, change, transfer, and packaging of energy. Fourth, by generalizing the energy-informational parameters of the motion of a physical point to a physical line, and to the entire ECT Gaussian space. The results of such methodological use of the categories of dialectical logic were three theorems of the existence of energy-informational objects for the analysis of the properties of the motion of matter. 1. The first theorem proves the existence of a phase of the energy invariant of a physical point, which replaced the non-parametric equation of the Schrödinger wave function with the parametric equation of the energy-informational wave function. It is shown how the quality of motion of a physical point in ECT space changes depending on passive, active, and total energy. Thus, changes in the spatio-temporal parameters of translational motion with a change in potential energy of physical space. The quality of motion changes from translational to parabolic, hyperbolic, elliptical, stochastic, jump, when passive energy changes. For translational motion with zero passive energy, the changes in spacetime are analogous to the changes in relative motion with Lorentz transformations, but are due to changes in the active energy of motion of a physical point. The need for a special introduction of Lorentz transformations into motion has disappeared, and the parametric informative value of motion has increased. 2. The second theorem proves the existence of an equation for the phase of the energy invariant of a physical point, which made it possible to solve the problem by unambiguously identifying the fundamental parameters of general physics, energies with the parameters of general geometry, curvatures, with the parameters of the algebra of quaternions, integers, with the parameters of computer science, entropy. This equation takes into account the laws of conservation by Hamiltonian, change by Lagrangian, transport by Ohmwave-Poynting, and packing by Newton. The spin of a physical point appears naturally. Tested on the spins of the electron, planets to the plane of rotation of the solar system, the Sun to the plane of rotation of the galaxy. 3. The third theorem, on the basis of the first and second theorems, proved the existence of a function from the phase of the energy invariant as an argument to the function. This function simulated the deterministic probability of the process of increasing the mass of physical space, which was called Gaussian physical space. The function was derived from the idea of a sequential, infinite, increase in the mass, energy, of matter from a given minimum mass of a physical point that has a minimum space and arbitrary other physical parameters that make up the total, active, and passive energies. The function is called the deterministic probability function, DPF for short. It is shown on the slide. The deterministic probability function has opened up a new type of quantum computing, wave or photon. These are objective quantum physical calculations of Planck matter, which do not depend on technical means. Physical addition, as an interaction, of the internal information of two, or more, dpf quanta is carried out. In other words, the information of the bit and qubit is generalized, the quadrobin. Quadrobit requires thermodynamic conditions of real physical space, underground, above ground, or others. Precise technique, emission of initial information, interaction of information, registration of the received information of dpf quanta. A quantum quadrobit computer will be the simplest, the most accurate, the fastest, the most informative, since 24 physical measurements or parameters of the dpf quantum are deterministically calculated at once. Moreover, the physical and mathematical calculation takes place, not only in the forward, but also in the opposite direction. Such is the energy-informational property of dpf with the parameters of the energy triad, consisting of 24 independent physical parameters of motion. I will say a few words about the properties of the dpf quantum. This is a real-world model of a photon in which action is a soliton, Planck's constant, consisting of 24 parameters of motion, which fold and unfold in action. Energy is the first differential of action in time. Power, the second time differential of the action. Momentum, Hamilton's differential. Force, Lagrange differentials. One period of oscillation, with a small connection with the source, with the denial of Heisenberg uncertainty within the period, that is, with the determination of all the physical parameters of Planck of the physical space inside the photon. The period has the same frequencies, amplitude Planck, Prony's attenuation, Fourier oscillations. The action of the soliton, as dpf, generates Chebyshev polynomials by the phase of the energy invariant, as wave packets with different phases of the energy invariant, as solutions to the equation of a quantum oscillator. The unity of the wave, the intrinsic property of the energy of the physical ECT Gaussian space, and the particle, the extrinsic property of energy in space-time. Dividing a photon into small photons. Folding of a photon into a particle, electron, positron, at the curvature of the surface of the quantum of a magnetic line. The hypothesis was tested by the balance of the energy triads of the electron and photon up to the 10th place of accuracy. The next confirmation of such a process may be the period of time between the activity on the surface of the Sun and the activity of the northern lights. The geometric images of the deterministic probability function are interesting. Depending on the values of the energy triad, the function generates areas, cylinders, spheres, black holes, 8-quadrant non-intersectable spaces, various three-dimensional figures similar to molecules, crystals, and other images changing in the ECT space. The deterministic probability function has been tested on the experimental energy parameters of 9 planets of the Solar System, the Sun, and the Galaxy. On the experimental energy parameters of more than 100 elements of the periodic table. On the energy information entropy of Shannon, von Neumann, Gibbs. On the information laws of the unity of chaos order. On the experimental energy parameters of 260 elements of the geological environment. On the experimental socio-economic parameters of 200 economies of the world, with an energy informational interpretation, commodity is passive energy, labor is active energy, finance is the equivalent of total socio-economic energy equal to the sum of the capital of the commodity and the capital of labor. The econo-physical cycle of production-consumption of GDP was modeled, taking into account the costs of its production, as a payment for labor to restore active socio-economic energy, and the costs of its consumption, as a market capital from the sale of goods, as the value of passive socio-economic energy. It was discovered that only 30 countries in the world have a successful economy in which capital of production is equal to capital of consumption. In the remaining 170 countries, the capital of production is several times less than the capital of consumption. This means that in the production of GDP, labor is not valued, and in the realization of GDP, the commodity is revalued, creating a high market value of GDP. The deterministic probability function, when differentiated by phase of an energy invariant in a geological environment, suggested a new physical property of matter at a singular point in a system of physical points. With the absolute symmetry of the gravitational force in the center of mass, the sign of this gravitational force changes to the opposite, that is, the compression changes to the stretching of matter. This is how the gravitational plasma hypothesis, GP, was born. Slide No. 7 is dedicated to it. This slide No. 4.1 provides more information about the deterministic probability function. The structural properties of the phase of the energy invariant in the Gaussian space-energy spacetime are shown. The peculiarity of these simplest static energy-informational images is their dependence on one dimension, the total energy of the system of physical points. A deterministic probability function, depending on its internal energy structure, can change its images over time. To do this, it is necessary to set the external conditions and internal functions of time, general or local. This is successfully accomplished by artificial intelligence. Thus, image No. 4 is a closed function of deterministic probability with negative feedback. The physics of this condition reveals an infinite flow of energy in a narrow direction, which is called energy resonance. The physical properties of this resonance have infinitely large both positive and negative rates of action transmission in the zero energy potential, state of rest, of matter. That is, when matter disappears in zero energy potential, this is instantly corrected by the property of energy resonance. The energy structure contains both static geometric properties of the structure and dynamic ones, which have a periodic nature with the stable existence of the entire image. Let us consider the energy-informational properties of Newton's laws of universal gravitation. Slide 5. This slide shows those changes in the law of universal gravitation for physical space with concentrated energy parameters in the systems of physical points, which were revealed by the energy-informational analysis of the motion of material systems, in particular, in the motion of cosmic objects of the solar system and the galaxy. A feature of the changes is the presence of spin. This physical attribute of the system of physical points is the result of the general action of the laws, conservation, change, transfer, and packaging of the energy triad. The spin model is a unity of equations: Newton, Hamilton, Lagrange, Poisson, Planck, Maxwell. The changes prove an unambiguous and direct energy connection between the properties of physical space at the macro and micro levels. A similar model of spin is obtained for the electromagnetic properties of matter. Since spin is associated with the action of the laws of inter-energy relations, it establishes a physical connection between the gravitational properties of matter and its electromagnetic properties. Spins are numerically checked by the astrophysical parameters of the planets of the solar system, the Sun, and the galaxy in the gravitational field, microparticles and dpf quanta in the electromagnetic field. Spin belongs to the entire EST Gaussian space. The slide shows the unity of the definition of mass for Max Planck's physics and mass for Isaac Newton's physics. In the lectures on this topic, Max Planck's quantitative and qualitative connections and processes of origin of mass and charge of physical space are shown on the basis of the fundamental constants of matter. Considering the result of differentiation of the deterministic probability function by the phase of the energy invariant as applied to the Earth's geological environment, it was established that the energy structure and characteristics of the distribution of active, passive, and total energy within the geological environment explain the known geophysical parameters of the Earth determined from seismology. Thus, the active, passive, and total energies of the Earth increase from the surface to the middle of the Earth's radius. Moreover, active energy is equal to passive energy. After the middle of the radius, only the total and active energies continue to grow towards the center. And passive energy begins to decrease, and in the center of mass it becomes zero. This means that the gravitational force first grows and then changes sign, and the attraction changes to the stretching of matter. This is how the gravitational plasma hypothesis, GP, was born. Slide No. 7 is dedicated to it. Slide 6. This slide shows the results of studies of physical space without the gravitational property of matter. The initial idea of the study is the inextricable connection of all physical points of matter at the zero point. This is the primary property of matter, which is manifested in the limited speed of transmission of the disturbance with the electromagnetic property. The well-known hyperbolic space-time metric of the special theory of relativity models an open physical space with zero inactive potential. In this theory, reference systems, as separate physical points, are not interconnected, they are free, their configurations are free, arbitrary initial and final conditions of analysis are free. In quantum physics, the space-time metric is lost, and the infinite connection is proven. In the method of energy-informational analysis of the motion of material systems, all reference systems are inseparably connected with each other by zero, and the infinite sum of the speeds of such reference systems cannot exceed the speed of light. Zero is an entity deeper than gravitation, connecting the physical points of matter. It creates the property of continuity, even for large energies of discontinuity, and continuity of motion in the direction of the axis O, shown in the lower left figure of the slide. The sum of the velocities of such connected physical points takes into account the discrete properties of the points of matter, namely, their initial and repeatable sizes. And, studying the spatiotemporal metric of such a physical space, it was discovered that inside a closed physical space, and this space is less than the whole number of the primary unit of such a physical quality as the mass of a point of matter, when approaching the center of mass in it, there is an increase in the negative velocity of the internal perturbation to an infinite value. It can be assumed with a high probability that this property underlies the formation of mass with the volume of Schwarzschild space, and the long-range infinitely fast force that binds everything together like inertia. The figures, right, show the velocity distributions of stars in our galaxy without explicitly taking into account the gravitational property of its masses. Two conditions are considered. The first, upper figure reflects the motion of stars in the disk of the galaxy without the presence of initial physical space. The second, lower figure reflects the motion of stars in the disk of the galaxy at the initial given physical space. The lower figure shows that our galaxy appeared as a break or explosion of physical space at a local point with the subsequent propagation of a damped perturbation with a changing frequency of the perturbation wave. Energo-informational model of the space-time metric, equation 1, allows you to study all the general characteristics and parameters of physical space by analyzing the kinematic parameters of the wave disturbance. This equation provides solutions for all the qualities of the motion of matter: translational, parabolic, hyperbolic, elliptical, stochastic, depending on the controlling external astrophysical influence or conditions. The idea of the primary connection of all physical points with the zero potential of physical space is clearly confirmed by the thermal radiation of the masses of cosmic objects, particles, planets, stars, galaxies. Studying the thermal radiation of the planets of the solar system, the authors of this study noted that with the increase in mass, the thermal intrinsic energy of the planet grows. Thus, the idea of a physical internal source of thermal energy generated in the center of mass was born. This energy is called geothermal energy. Energy is radiated by both the Earth and the Sun. The physical process that generates geothermal energy is gravitational plasma, which appears at the point of the center of mass, as in the most rarefied zero point of physical space. The geothermal energy of the Earth, on its surface, is 20,000 times more than this. Thermal energy is packed into all types of fuels, nuclear, hydrocarbon and biofuels. 100% safer, more stable, more affordable, more environmentally friendly than them. 3 times more exogenous heat from the sun. Gravitational plasma will be considered in more detail on slide No. 7. This slide No. 6.1 provides information about the necessary new scientific direction in the study of physical space, the purely geometric method. The fact that geometry is matter has always been said by Plato, Aristotle, Euclid, Einstein. But what geometry? The validity of the geometric idea was shown by slide No. 6, which explains the real velocities of stars in our galaxy without involving the ideas of gravity. That is, gravity itself is the geometry of space-time, as general relativity says, but for empty space. The studies shown on slide No. 6 show that all physical points of physical space are connected by a zero potential, which cannot be broken, and gravity has a limited sphere of action. The new geometry, in quotation marks, should answer the questions posed on this slide. Such geometry in quotation marks is based on the theorem No. 2 of the energy-informational analysis of the motion of material systems. The new geometry generalizes linear, parabolic, hyperbolic, elliptical, stochastic, adding the laws of physics to their foundations. As a result of such synthesis, physical geometry appeared, which is one of the axioms of energy-informational analysis. This slide shows a model of a new geometry, the so-called physical geometry, which is fundamentally related to matter, its motion, its physical parameters, which make up the measures of energies, general, active, passive, and their structure. Let us proceed to the consideration of total energy, the first representative of which is gravitational energy, which underlies the Max Planck elementary length of the entire physical space and is unjustly reduced by modern science of its force characteristics in quantum mechanics. This is evidenced by calculations of the formation of an electron from a quantum of light at the curvature of a magnetic line of force. So, total energy and gravity are shown on slide number 7. Slide 7. This slide shows the gravitational plasma, which is the physical basis of the endogenous heat of the Earth, planets, stars, and all other huge accumulations of masses in space. What is the physical mechanism of the GP? A coherent system of physical points with large masses creates a gravitational field. This field has an energy-informational structure, which is confirmed by the distribution of geophysical parameters within the system, discovered on the example of the gravitational field in the geological environment of the Earth. The gravitational field of the mass system attracts smaller masses and is attracted by larger masses. Within the system, masses are compressed to a certain depth from the surface. Closer to the center, there are fewer external masses. A slow process of stretching the internal masses begins. In the center of mass of a coherent system, gravitational plasma is born. This is when the tensile effect of the volumetric gravitational force of external masses becomes greater than the binding forces of quark shells in protons and neutrons. The shells burst, and the packed energy into protons and neutrons is released. This is the physical nature of geothermal energy. Thermal and electrical energy is released in the center of large masses. Above the center of mass, concentric spherical layers are formed, consisting of nuclei, atoms, molecules, crystals plus liquids plus gases, gases of the atmosphere. Free electrons create currents in the core, outer core, magma, lithosphere, atmosphere, from the center of mass to the positively charged surface of the atmosphere. The physical mechanism of the gravitational plasma is based on Newton's law of universal gravitation, which is formulated for energy-informational analysis by the following representation: the space of the physical point of the center of external masses is always greater than the space of the physical point of the center of internal masses. The principle of connection between the infinite small and the infinitely large of dialectical logic has been fulfilled. Physical point, physical line, physical surface, physical volume are the main geometric categories in the theory of energy-informational analysis of all forms of motion of matter, which consist of the corresponding measurable parameters at all scales of cognition of the motion of material systems. And then it is a matter of mathematics, which determine the size of the singular physical point for local physical systems, the proton, the moon, the earth, the sun, and the galaxy, shown on the slide. For the infinite masses of the universe, the volume of its singular physical point is equal to infinity. This means that everything that we observe in space is located in the region of a common singular point, which is called the universe or Gaussian physical space, abbreviated as ECT, energy space-time. At each point of this space, the laws of conservation, change, transfer, and packaging of energy operate. The following can be added in more detail about gravitational plasma. GP breaks the quark shells of protons and neutrons by generating endogenous heat energy in the middle of a critical cluster of elementary masses, planets, stars, galaxies, and the entire physical space, ECT. The magnitude of this energy depends on the total mass of the system of coherent physical points. What is the physical process of the formation of a GP? Each mass generates a gravitational PDV quantum, in which the first half wave has negative energy, or the energy of rarefied physical space. The addition of two colliding such half waves forms a common point with more rarefied matter. A double mass is created with a coherent total reduced frequency at the root of 2. For example, when a critical mass of a local system of physical points is formed, a Lagrange point L1 is formed in its center of mass. By placing a proton in it, like a tennis ball, with the mass concentrated in the shell of quarks, they begin to be affected by the symmetrical volume force of gravitational attraction of the entire external critical mass. A negative external pressure is created on the quark shell with an energy density greater than that created by quarks to preserve the volume of the proton. The proton, neutron, bursts. The mc² energy is released in the form of gamma quanta. From the center of mass along the radius to the surface of the system of physical points, the phases of the energy invariant of the condensed matter are distributed. From the center to the surface, the energy density of the gravitational field decreases. The phases of the energy invariant of substances are distributed in accordance with this energy density. The phases of heavy, heated, substances are located closer to the center, the phases of light, cooled, substances are located closer to the surface. Substances are arranged in the form of concentric spherical homogeneous layers of different thicknesses. Physical processes are going on inside the strata. Down to the center, there is a decay of heavy substances. Upwards, there is the formation of new light substances. The first gravitational envelope is located above the center of mass. This is a boiling proton-neutron cloud. The second gravitational shell is located above the first and consists of atomic nuclei. Nuclei with maximum iron decay energies are located on the inner surface of the gravitational shell, and nuclei with minimum decay energies, such as hydrogen-helium, are located on the outer surface of this shell. The third gravitational shell is located above the second and consists of hydrogen-helium atoms, as atoms with the maximum energy of dissociation of electron shells, located on the inner surface of this shell, and atoms, with the minimum energy of ionization of electron shells, are located on the outer surface of the gravitational shell. The fourth gravitational shell is located above the third and consists of condensed matter in the form of boiling, formation, destruction, simple and complex molecules of liquids, gases, and matter. The fifth shell is the crystalline lithosphere, consisting of crystals, liquids, gases that absorb and transmit heat to the atmosphere of IR waves. The capacities of the Fourier and Stefan-Boltzmann heat fluxes are shown on the slide. The sixth gravitational envelope of the Earth is the atmosphere, which consists of cold gases. The seventh shell is the open shell of the gravitational field itself, which connects the system of masses of coherent physical points with open physical space. GP physics is a mass resonance. If the mass of the physical system is equal to the mass of the Sun, the upper shell will consist of hydrogen and helium atoms, and the inner shell will consist of the nuclei of these atoms and iron nuclei, which, approaching the GPU region, are destroyed into individual protons and neutrons last, and in the center of the GPU are destroyed into high-energy gamma quanta. The latter, after repeated absorption radiation, reducing their frequency, come to the surface of the system of physical points. If the mass of the star reaches such a value that there are no more hydrogen and helium atoms left, but two layers remain, one of protons, the second of neutrons, the star is ready to explode. Moreover, neutrons, as heavier physical systems, are located under a layer of protons. And the slightest external disturbance of the gravitational balance between the outer and inner gravitational pressure of the shell, the star explodes. At the same time, the inner point of the center of mass compresses the neutron shell to the density of a neutron, and free protons are ejected by charges into open physical space, forming new particles of dust, gases, and matter in the vicinity of the former star during condensation. If the mass of the system of physical points reaches the mass of the galaxy, then a GP is created in the center of its mass, which begins to generate gamma quanta and high-energy particles from physical space, which, having moved away from the center, condense into galactic gases, dust, gamma quanta of lower energy, creating new planets and stars. This is the physical role of GP in the physical space of space that we observe. A scientific program has been developed to study the thermal properties of GPS together with the electromagnetic properties of physical space. The thermal energy of gravitational plasma on the Earth's surface is 20,000 times greater than the thermal energy packed into all types of surface and underground fuels combined. To date, a technology has been developed to convert the Earth's endogenous heat into electrical energy with an efficiency of up to 100%, which is 10 times more efficient than modern steam geothermal turbines. The implementation of such technology requires investment. The economic efficiency of the technology for generating electricity from geothermal energy is proved by slide no 8. This efficiency consists in the liberation of more than 30 trillion euros from the cessation of the development of world inflation, which lives from the generation of electricity obtained from calorific fuels with an efficiency of 35%. These funds were annually accumulated in banks to cover 65% of man-made thermal energy, which is emitted into the atmosphere, heating and polluting it for 100 years. Slide No 7.1 provides information on the technology that allows the use of energy resonance, which significantly increases the efficiency of existing technologies for using one type of total energy into other types of energy: open type, electric, closed type, hydrogen. One of these technologies is shown in the figure on the left. This technology shows the existence of a theoretical synergistic efficiency of up to 200% from a single source in a static state. In a real complex efficiency consisting of static efficiency and dynamic efficiency, this 200% is averaged over a period of up to 100%, which is shown in the graph. However, the technology has been developed and is ready for implementation. The technology has been repeatedly proposed in Austria to OMV Exploration and Production GmbH, which owns a unique physical abandoned facility. The payback period of this technology is from 1 to 3.5 years and depends on the scale of use at the lowest cost of a unit of electric energy, equal to the cost of a unit of heat from oil combustion. Science is clear and interesting, but powerless against IQ filters to implement. Therefore, let's move on to the all-powerful socio-economic energy, labor, goods, money. Slide 8. This slide shows a structural, physical and economic model of a socio-economic system, SES for short. SES is a new dialectical form of the movement of material systems consisting of complex systems of material points, biological, commodity, financial. All the economies of the 200 known countries of the world have such a structure. The structure has financial, industrial, social, market subsystems. The movement of a solar power plant is calculated: active solar energy, passive solar energy and total solar power generation. Active SPP energy measures the operation of the industrial subsystem, which is the energy of living and embodied labor. Passive SPP energy measures the static state of the market subsystem, which is the energy of GDP, in which the energy of living and non-living labor is stored in primary and secondary goods and services performed. The total SPP energy measures finance in the financial subsystem as the necessary amount of financial capital with a certain physical equivalent of the measurement of natural SPS energies, living and non-living labor and all commodity units that make up GDP. These subsystems work sequentially and in parallel in a single continuous discrete cycle of production-consumption of GDP. In this socio-economic cycle, active and passive socio-economic energies are used and restored. The structure of the SES does not depend on religious, political, scientific thinking. Primary biophysical factors, ecophysics, hunger, diseases, procreation, are the initial internal driving forces of the subject. Biophysical factors are formed, biosocial systems with external passive and active parameters. The energy parameters of biosocial systems are: active energy, male population; passive energy, female population; general social energy, family, tribe, nation, people, society, which are the result of the action of biophysical factors. With the increase in the number of biosocial systems, there is a need for an expanded development of matter. A sufficient solution for the development of matter is the creation of a socio-economic system. Many objective and subjective needs operate in the SES as the driving forces of the economy and thinking. The socio-economic efficiency of the functioning of the structure of the SES cycle depends on thinking. In the SES, there are active SPP energy. These are actions of varying complexity, in time, of labor resources and productive means, increasing, decreasing, accelerating, slowing down, strengthening, weakening production and the quality of GDP. GDP is a passive SPP energy designed to restore the entire social resource and the means of reproduction of GDP itself, and is determined by the parameters, the number of commodity units of GDP and its ability to restore the social resource. The efficiency of the functioning of the socio-economic system is determined by the parameters of the stability of the production-consumption SES cycle for simple and extended restoration of the social resource, the quality and duration of its life, with the development of natural resources by safe technologies based on objective laws, physics, chemistry, biology, sociology, economics, thinking. The parameters of stability and efficiency of the reproduction of a social resource entirely depend on the self-consciousness of society. SES self-consciousness consists of that objective IQ part in the subjective consciousnesses of specific social systems, which belongs to the objective desires of each and all members of society. Law as the power of the higher mind for its being on the basis of the SES. History has shown the change in the forms of the existence of self-consciousness from religious to political. The history of the transition from the political form of self-consciousness to the scientific form is ripe. A society with a scientific form of self-consciousness in the management of the SES is called an intellectual society. The self-consciousness of an intellectual society for self-preservation formulates the basic law of its existence in the Constitution. The basic law of the functioning of the intellectual SES is formulated as follows: the socio-economic system on the historical territory developed by a single people was created for the sustainable, simple and expanded reproduction of its social resource, the quality and duration of its life, by the method of production and consumption of GDP in the development of natural resources by safe technologies based on objective laws, physics, chemistry, biology, sociology, economics, thinking. Further, the Constitution sets out all the necessary articles of the norms that ensure the implementation of this law. Energy-informational analysis provides an objective vision of the efficiency of the SPP functioning. The energy-informational analysis of the work of the production-consumption cycle of GDP proved that the efficiency of 35% of the transformation of the primary commodity, in the form of thermal energy, into a secondary commodity, such as electrical energy and mechanical work, develops systematic financial and energy inflation. This IQ strategy of the self-consciousness of society destabilizes natural and financial activities in the SES. The slide shows social resource, socio-economic cycle. The laws of static and dynamic stability of reproduction in time of a social resource, as well as the natural and value forms of capitals of labor, goods, money. Parameters of the production-consumption equilibrium of GDP of a stable cycle. M is a parameter of the complexity of the technology of GDP reproduction. Mu is a parameter of the recovery of the social resource produced by GDP, as the inverse of a known parameter, GDP per person. More details about all econometric parameters of energy-informational analysis of SES are considered in a specific course of lectures shown on slides No. 8, No. 9. Summary about the current state of effective solar power plants. The existence in the real world of 30 successful solar power plants, mainly the countries of the European Union, with an equilibrium economy, At the equilibrium point, cost of production of GDP equals cost of consumption of GDP, at different levels of their GDP, does not mean at all that these states have a scientific energy information model of a stable and efficient socio-economic cycle. Such a regime created religious self-consciousness with faith in the law. The higher mind creates its eternal existence in the image of each and all with the energy-informational parameters of the active and passive energy of its biological members, as the energy of memory and thinking. As a result of such a law, a socio-economic cycle was established in which cost of production of GDP equals value of consumption of GDP. If, in a single state, the effectiveness of the SES cycle is violated, then this indicates only one thing, namely, the self-consciousness of this society, not scientific, not political, not religious. Not scientific, because it does not have an energy-informational model of an effective SES cycle, not political because it does not have information about the existence of such SES cycles, it is not religious, because the consciousness of society does not have faith in the will of the higher mind of the creation of the being of each and all. I will cite a few figures. The history of the Russian economy from 1913 to 1993 changed the cost of labor in the value of GDP from 51% to 19%. That is, the wage fund in the value of GDP, at the time of the collapse of the USSR, amounted to 19%. The inefficiency coefficient, as the ratio of 100% of the value of GDP divided by 19%, was 5.26. At the equilibrium point, this ratio should be half as much, that is, equal to 2.63 against the objective correct effective value, the SES cycle, equal to 1. As a result, the energy of labor was not restored, interest in work, as well as in the new political thinking of the self-consciousness of society, disappeared. The reason, the balance between objective and subjective needs, has not been found by political thinking. Let me remind you that self-consciousness is the highest power for consciousness. Consciousness is a point-fact phenomenon moment of the information structure of knowledge of being in a biological and social system. Self-consciousness is a line trajectory law of movement of being from the past, through the present, to the future, which can be calculated on the basis of taking into account all the basic parameters and properties of the motion of matter. The history of the U.S. economy, as of 2023, showed the coefficient of inefficiency of the solar power cycle, taking into account export-import values, at the level of 2.24. The equilibrium point is shifted from 1 to 1.1628 in the direction of consumption. That is, society consumes more than it produces. The history of the Chinese economy, as of 2023, has a SBS efficiency indicator of level 2. At the equilibrium point of the ratio production to consumption, equal to 1. That is, the SES cycle based on the political self-consciousness of China, for a population of 1.4 billion people, has reached the effective value of the cycle production equals consumption, that is, equal to 1. A detailed exposition of econophysics as exact economics is contained in the corresponding lectures, the titles of which are given on slide No. 9. Slide 8.1. This slide shows the phase diagram of the Carpo-econophysical cycle, which determines the static and dynamic efficiency of the turnover of financial capital depending on the technical efficiency of the conversion of primary energy into the final form of energy. The slide also shows a dynamic model of the reproduction of primary and final energy, which analyzes the turnover of capital, labor, goods, and finance in an arbitrary econophysical cycle, containing export-import flows of capital. Using the example of hydrogen generation from oil, the market price of hydrogen per kilogram is determined. Actual technical schemes, diesel generator, electrolyzer, hydrogen, use diesel fuel. But, all the same, the final market price of hydrogen is equal to the cost of a unit of oil. On the right, examples of determining optimal market prices, using the Carpo cycle, for various technologies for generating heat and electricity, as a final product, based on the cost of a commodity unit of oil, are shown. Optimal prices correspond to constant financial capital. The most efficient energy is the geothermal heat, electricity technology. This technology, with the same costs for drilling wells for oil and gas, does not limit the consumption of stable, affordable, environmentally friendly, safe, autonomous electric energy with financial capital in the cycle 3 times less than the thermal electric technology on oil and gas. Such technology is ready for implementation. All general energy solutions are considered in more detail in the course of lectures of Project No. 2. Slide 9. These slides contain lecture courses on 3 scientific aspects: quantum computing, power engineering, economics. Using energy informational analysis of the movement of material systems. The first aspect is aimed at conducting scientific research in various fields and not only physics. In physics, this is the field of quantum computing, as a result of which masses and charges, various atomic and molecular structures appear. For the appearance of masses and charges, quanta of the deterministic probability function, dense magnetic and electrostatic fields, and precise special computing equipment are needed to implement and control the results of the interaction of the centers of quanta, and electromagnetic lines. To study the parameters of physical space and its material systems. The second aspect is aimed at the effective physical and technical economic development of the endogenous heat of the Earth and the physical study of other space objects by IR waves of this heat by satellites. The third aspect makes it possible to study the economics of the movement of socio-economic systems according to the objective laws of reproduction of socio-economic resources using the material resources of the Earth. Details of each aspect. Scientific aspect No. 1. It is designed to develop the unity of physical mathematical and mathematical physical knowledge on the basis of DPF, consisting of the energy triad of motion. Development of the methodology for the synthesis of physical categories, mass and charge on the basis of energy-informational quantum computing, as an interaction, simultaneous addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, of Planck's internal spaces of 2 or more DPF quanta based on a quadrobit. An ideal energy-informational quadrobit in its volume contains 24 kinematic and 8 energy parameters, spins, of motion. Ideally, the distribution of these parameters in the DPF forms a smooth sphere in Gaussian physical space. The potential number of spatial figures from these parameters will be 10 to the 192nd power of variance. Of practical interest is the value of the total energy of DPF, as a system of physical points, which forms 8 non-intersecting energy-informational quadrants with a 3D metric of real physical space. Quadrants can be connected by an arbitrary magnetic line, like a closed string or a vortex as a result of a local displacement of Gaussian physical space. Development of technologies for the formation, existence, and change of material structures in spacetime, taking into account the dynamics of the energy triad of the movement of the system of physical points. Development of epistemological solutions, goals, for technologies and methodologies of given movements of a system of physical points. Scientific aspect No. 2. Designed for development of information technologies for remote sensing of the Earth's atmosphere and lithosphere based on IR waves, thermal field of geothermal energy using DPF. Development of materials, equipment, structures, technologies for the effective development of geothermal energy. Development of materials, equipment, structures, technologies for converting geothermal energy into electrical energy and hydrogen with an efficiency of up to 100%. Scientific aspect No. 3. Designed for development of information technologies for the analysis and management of the closed cycle of production consumption in the socio-economic system using the FDV with the parameters of distribution of natural resources, goods, labor, finances in the state, and throughout the world economy. The author has managed to study the increase in the adequacy of objective-subjective logic in physics, chemistry, economics, and thinking. Other forms of motion of matter, biological, social, have their own energy triad, general, active, passive energy, and can be studied by energy-informational analysis. This is especially true for biological objects with a living internal structure. Thank you for your attention. And I am waiting for messages for the desired lectures, for the presented scientific ideas and results, for hypotheses and proposals for the applications of this analysis to various sciences and practices.